The past is the one part of our lives we can never erase or rewrite. Yet all of us regret things we've done. All of us wish we could avoid our mistakes or make up for them, and become better versions of ourselves. The weight of the past leaves scars. It makes us suffer, and it traps us in an endless cycle of repeating the same mistakes over and over again. But what if I told you there was a way to escape your past, to make up for your mistakes, to fundamentally change who you are? And it doesn't matter how heavy your burden is, or what you've done before. At some point, I realized that a surprising number of anime and manga keep pointing toward the same answer. Vinland Saga, Vagabond, and even Evangelion all suggest that if you want to be reborn as someone new, if you want to rediscover yourself and leave your past mistakes behind, then all you need to do is but let's go through it, step by step. The prologue of Vinland Saga, which is its first season, doesn't hold back in portraying the brutality of its world. This is medieval Europe, where war, power struggles, greed, revenge, and violence are simply facts of life. Those who aren't killed in battle often end up sold into slavery, and Viking culture itself glorifies death in combat, pouring fuel onto a fire that has already engulfed the continent. Throughout the season, we watch people commit terrible acts. More importantly, through the eyes of Thorfinn, a boy who was drawn into this terrifying world from an early age, we come to accept those acts. Sometimes we even cheer them on. Thorfinn wants revenge for his father's death, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to get it. And we're completely on his side, no matter what sacrifices his quest demands. Whether it's an enemy commander or an innocent woman who once offered him shelter, the goal always seems to justify the cost. Thorfinn never stops to count how many people he's killed, how many lives he's ruined, how many fields he's burned, or how many villages he's helped pillage. And as viewers, neither do we. At the very least, we become passive observers. At worst, we become accomplices to Thorfinn's actions. But everything changes when Askeladd, the man who both killed Thorfinn's father and in many ways raised him, dies. In that moment, Thorfinn loses the only purpose he has ever had. He loses the hatred that kept him moving forward. Everything he learned, everything he knew how to do, revolved around fighting. But now, for the first time in his life, he has no reason to fight at all, and he's left completely empty.
Nande? 死ぬのを怖がらなくちゃいけないんですか？死にたくないから生きてるんですか？生きてると何かいいことはありますか？俺はなかったよ。今まで生きてきていいこと一つもなかったよ。
So how does a man like that move forward? How does someone stained by blood and consumed by revenge make peace with his past? How does he make up for his mistakes? And how does he find a new purpose in life? To answer that question, Makoto Yukimura makes a bold choice. He introduces a time skip and shows us Thorfinn several years after the prologue, and he's become a slave on a farm. His job is to clear a forest and turn the land into a field. If he succeeds, the owner promises to grant him his freedom. The problem is that Thorfinn barely cares. He has no idea what he would even do with his freedom, but the work gives him something simple and concrete to focus on. Cut down trees, clear the land. One day after another, it allows him to live on autopilot. At first, this might seem like a dramatic departure from the blood-soaked story of the prologue, but in reality, it's the most natural continuation imaginable. For his entire life, Thorfinn learned only one thing: how to destroy. But to escape the emptiness that destruction has left behind, he needs to learn something new. He needs to learn how to create. When Thorfinn plows a field and plants wheat for the first time, he finds himself looking at a plow, in a way he never has before. And suddenly, he realizes that someone had to invent it. Someone had to come up with the idea. Someone had to teach others how to build it. Someone had to pass that knowledge on. For the first time in his life, Thorfinn finds himself in a situation where all he can do is wait. Wait for the wheat to grow. And in the process, he discovers something simple but profound. Creation takes time and patience, while destruction can happen in an instant. For the first time, Thorfinn feels pride in the work he's done, not out of greed or hatred, but out of a sense of peace and fulfillment. Einar, another slave working alongside him, notices the change immediately. He says that Thorfinn looks like a little kid staring at a brand new toy with his mouth hanging open. Because in a way, that's exactly what he is. Thorfinn is a child seeing an entirely different way of living for the very first time, which is why it hits so hard when a group of hired workers destroy the freshly planted field, driven by the same greed, the same selfishness, the same urge to take rather than create. This is where Thorfinn's self-reflection begins. Looking at these men, he suddenly recognizes his former self. The destruction of the field symbolizes more than just the loss of hard work. It's a metaphor for the countless people Thorfinn has killed. When you plant a field, there's no guarantee that every seed will grow. But every seed carries potential, the possibility of becoming something more. The same is true for people. Even if someone hasn't accomplished anything yet, even if they haven't done any great good in the world, they still carry the possibility of a brighter future. And that's what makes taking a life such a tragedy. For the first time, Thorfinn begins to understand that many of the people he killed may have been just like Einar, innocent people trying to live their lives. For the first time, he starts to grasp the pain he has inflicted on others. Thorfinn is guided by two figures, his father and Askeladd. One shows him the path toward the light. The other shows him where the path of revenge ultimately leads. You have no enemies. This is the lesson Thorfinn once knew, but forgot. But simply putting down the sword is no longer enough. That's only the first step. Making a promise not to kill anyone ever again won't make up for the lives he's already taken. Refusing to harm others in the future does nothing to change the harm he has caused in the past. The debt is still there. And the only way to repay it is through creation. He has to grow as much wheat as he once destroyed, build as many homes as he once burned, save as many lives as he once took. Only then can he begin to balance the scales. It's telling that Canute, a man moving in the opposite direction, from a timid idealist to a ruler willing to kill and conquer, ultimately backs down in the face of Thorfinn's conviction. Because deep down, he still shares the same belief and the same dream, a world without violence. The second season of Vinland Saga is about the value of labor and the importance of taking responsibility for the harm you've caused, and it teaches that lesson not only to its characters, but to its audience as well. But more than anything, it's a story about how to find yourself again, how to rebuild your life after losing your purpose, how to become someone new. All you have to do is But before we get there, let's look at one more example. The themes of Vagabond and Vinland Saga are remarkably similar. Both stories grapple with violence, the value of human life, and what a person, especially a warrior, should ultimately strive for. And just like Vinland Saga, Vagabond centers on a protagonist with blood on his hands. From a young age, Shinmen Takezo, better known as Miyamoto Musashi, was feared for his ferocity. He was the kind of person who would kill anyone foolish enough to stand in his way. The people in his village even gave him a nickname, the Demon Child. Obsessed with becoming stronger, he went off to war, while still a teenager. And after returning, he set out on a journey to challenge the strongest fighters he could find. One duel after another, one victory after another, always searching for greater strength. He was obsessed with fighting, and with the dream of becoming invincible, unmatched by anyone. But in reality, that goal was never really about skill or glory. It was a desperate attempt to escape the shadow of his abusive father and the feeling that he was fundamentally worthless. For Takezo, strength becomes a shield, a way to hide his vulnerability and pain. The problem is that his victories feel empty. He moves from one duel to the next, leaving bodies behind him, but gaining neither self-understanding nor any real connection to the world around him. Like Thorfinn in Vinland Saga, he eventually finds himself hollow. And like Thorfinn, when he confronts that emptiness and begins searching for a new meaning in life, he puts down the sword and picks up a plow. The farming arc is perhaps the most controversial and the most important part of Vagabond. At first glance, it seems almost absurd. A legendary swordsman suddenly settles in a poor village and devotes himself to helping its people survive a year of famine. Even Musashi himself repeatedly considers leaving, returning to the road, seeking out new opponents and new battles. After all, he knows how to fight. He doesn't know how to make the land fertile. And yet something keeps him there. Maybe it's the trauma that prevents him from moving forward the way he once did. Maybe it's the orphan boy who takes him in. Or maybe it's the growing realization that every time he kills someone, he's really wounding himself. At first, Musashi approaches farming the same way he approaches combat, like a warrior. He tries to overpower the river. He cuts into the earth as if he were swinging a sword. He treats nature itself as an opponent that must be defeated. But nature proves stronger than any warrior he has ever faced. The river still floods, the soil still dries out. And for perhaps the first time in his life, Musashi is forced to ask himself a question. What is the strength I've been chasing all this time? Throughout the arc, the image of water appears again and again. On one hand, water is a force powerful enough to sweep away houses and carve through stone. On the other, it's gentle. It heals wounds. It nourishes life. Musashi learns to live within this paradox. And in doing so, he begins to see life itself as a kind of current, shaped by forces beyond our control, yet still leaving room for choice. In the end, he stops trying to conquer the river. Instead, he learns to work with it. He creates a separate channel for the water and uses it to irrigate the fields. But even that isn't enough. For the land to become fertile, it needs life. Not a single life, embodied by Musashi alone, but countless forms of life. Insects, fallen leaves, compost, microorganisms, and everything else that makes an ecosystem thrive. A fertile field cannot be forced into existence through strength alone. You can't beat the earth into submission with a plow. You have to listen to it. Like Thorfinn, Musashi must learn the value of life. He has to become, in a sense, a defenseless man. Someone whose days are spent protecting fragile plants, caring for them, and constantly asking what more he can do to help them survive. As Musashi works, the people of the village begin to take notice. Slowly, a community forms around him. They place their faith in this strange, wandering samurai. They believe he might be able to help them survive the winter and grow enough rice to make it through another year. At first, Musashi rejects them. He thinks they should be ashamed of relying on him. But gradually, through his struggle with the river, through the search for fertile soil, and through the hardships of daily labor, he begins to accept them. And once he accepts them, he also accepts responsibility for them. For the first time, he is no longer working the fields for himself. He's working for other people. For Yori, the orphaned boy who gave him a place to stay. For the grumpy old man who shared his precious farmland. For the women who asked the samurai to teach them how to defend themselves. And for everyone else who has entrusted a part of their future to him. And it's here that Musashi finally discovers the strength he has been searching for all along. He realizes that strength is not measured by what you can destroy. It's measured by what you can protect. One of the most powerful moments in the manga comes when Musashi realizes that, despite all their efforts, the village will not survive the winter. the harvest won't be enough. People are going to starve. And so he does something that would have once been unthinkable. He goes to the local lord, falls to his knees, and begs for help. In that moment, kindness triumphs over pride. What Musashi once saw as weakness and humiliation turns out to be the very thing that makes a person truly strong. If Thorfinn's journey is about learning the value of labor and the importance of repaying a debt to the world, then Musashi's is about letting go of pride and finding strength in responsibility. Through the quiet rhythm of rural life, through the joy of growing food, through his relationships with other people, and through the fatherly bond he develops with a boy named Iori, Musashi finds a kind of happiness that no victory ever gave him. A happiness greater than anything he felt while climbing toward fame. And just like Vinland Saga, Vagabond suggests that if you want to find yourself again, if you want to discover a new purpose in life, all you have to do is But what if the thing weighing you down isn't what you did? What if it's what you failed to do? What if your fear, your weakness, or your indecision led to terrible consequences? How do you become a better person then? These are the questions that confront Shinji Ikari in the rebuild of Evangelion films. By the time the final movie begins, he's completely broken. His inability to act has cost him almost everything. He has lost Rei. His choices helped trigger 2 cataclysmic events that permanently changed the world. And the people closest to him, Asuka and Misato, have turned away from him. Shinji no longer wants to live. But he can't bring himself to die, either. He stops talking. He stops eating. He retreats entirely into himself, and like he always has, he tries to run away from the world. At the same time, Rei's clone, someone who has never truly experienced the world before, is encountering it for the very first time. Until now, the only thing she knew how to do was pilot and Yeva. But suddenly, everything is new. For the first time, she sees a cat. For the first time, she learns how to use a bath. And for the first time, she plants rice. It's through the ordinary routines of village life, surrounded by a close-knit community, that this artificial Rei gradually becomes a real person. She discovers that she can want things, that she can dream about the future, that she can care about other people, that she can love. And for the first time in her life, she finds something that feels like home. Evangelion is in many ways a story about depression. Honestly, that's a topic worthy of an entire essay on its own. But it's in these scenes where Rei is slowly discovering the world around her that we see the series' answer to that central theme. We begin to understand what might help a person find their way out of that darkness. Just like the watermelons Kaji once grew, ordinary everyday life becomes the key. Choosing life, caring for it, helping it grow. That's what truly matters. And it's telling that it is this artificial Rei, only after learning what life is, what community is, and what it means to create rather than destroy, who ultimately helps Shinji overcome his despair. Her kindness brings him back to reality. It gives him the strength to stand again. Because of Rei, Shinji learns more about the lives of his former classmates. He learns about Misato's struggles. He finally understands why Asuka lashed out at him after his return to Earth. And because of Rei, he is eventually able to face his father and recognize himself in him. What Evangelion seems to suggest is that even an empty shell can be filled by the simple routines of everyday life. That caring for others can give a person the strength to save someone else. And that participating in life can give confidence to someone who has never truly believed in themselves. And honestly, I think these are some of the most beautiful scenes in all of Evangelion. Alright, no more suspense. So what is this one surprisingly consistent answer that so many anime and manga keep pointing toward? If you want to be reborn as someone new, If you want to rediscover yourself and find a new purpose in life, you've probably figured it out by now. They want you to start farming. And no, this isn't a joke. Work the land and harvest its bounty. That is how a person should live. From Vinland Saga and Vagabond to Miyazaki's movies and Barakamon, these stories keep returning to the same idea. Renewal is found in nature, or more precisely, in the relationship between people and nature. This idea has deep roots in Japanese tradition. In the Shinto worldview, the world is inhabited by kami, spirits that dwell in rivers, fields, stones, trees, and countless other parts of the world. To cultivate the land is not merely to extract resources from nature, it is to enter into a relationship with these forces. It requires respect, humility, patience, and attentiveness. That's why, when a character in Japanese fiction turns to farming, it is almost never just a practical way to survive. It's a philosophical practice, a path of self-transformation, a way of restoring harmony between a person, other people, and the living world around them. Farming is cyclical. The seasons change, seeds sprout, the land renews itself, and these rhythms of nature become a metaphor for emotional and spiritual renewal. Farming demands humility, attentiveness, and care, but it also demands determination and resilience. It requires cooperation with neighbors, with animals, with the weather, and, in the Shinto imagination, with forces that remain unseen. Above all, it requires patience. It requires time. And all of these things stand in direct opposition to the qualities that define so many lost people in these stories: impulsiveness, destructiveness, fear, pride, and self-absorption. Farming gives a person something increasingly rare: time to stop, time to reflect, time to ask, who was I? And who do I want to become? And if you can answer those questions, then even a neglected field can bloom again. Just like a soul recovering from grief, from revenge, from pain, and from pride. So does that mean that if you want to change yourself, you should move to the countryside? Anime and manga seem to think so, and honestly, it probably works. But I think there's a broader way to read these stories. Farming is a metaphor for life itself. A life with changing seasons, unexpected storms, and years when nothing seems to grow. A life where creating something meaningful takes time. In the Shinto worldview, everything contains kami, and that idea extends beyond nature itself, not just to fields and rivers, but also to the spaces we live in, the clothes we wear, the tools we use, and the objects that quietly share our lives. Then maybe changing yourself isn't really about escaping to a farm. Maybe it's about learning to see your present differently, to return to your original form, to become empty again, to listen to the things around you, and yes, to realize once again that you have no enemies. That is what farming is about. And that is what anime and manga are trying to teach us.